All right, let's go ahead and get started. So this is me. I'm Erik Gross. As you can see, that is a slightly outdated picture. Got a little more gray in the hair. I'm a senior level software developer. I've been programming for, it says in my notes, decades. It's 44 years that I've been programming computers. I'm old. I'm a new Navy veteran. I operated nuclear reactors in the Navy and was an electronics technician. And I taught a lot of classes in the Navy. I was volunteered for it, which happens in the military, and turns out I really liked it. And I'm the co-founder of the Tech Academy, the school that puts on these free classes. So I'm glad you're here. Nice to have you all. So we have a wonderful assistant in the chat, Cheska, and she's there to help answer questions, monitor the chat, help me out with dropping links in and such. And she's here to boot people out if they're not nice, but it's been like a year since that happened, so I don't know why I keep on saying that every week. We have great people that attend these places, or attend these classes. All right, so chat, looks like you're all down with chat, know how to use that. That's not a problem, right? Okay, goody. So here's our agenda. We'll have a short explanation of the Tech Academy. Then we'll do our workshop, all about cybersecurity specialists. What do their lives look like? And we'll have a brief Q&A session. And we'll go over some information about our boot camps, and there's a free gift waiting for you at the end, so stick around. Whole class should take about an hour, hour and a half tops, okay? Let me just check on something before we move on. In chat, give me a yes if you are interested in cybersecurity as an actual job, like it's something that you might be kind of interested in or might appeal to you. Give me some yeses in there. All right, and if you're not, give me a no. That's fine as well. Got a bunch of yeses and not a one no. That's excellent. Okay, good. Now, we're going to get into a lot of details about what life looks like for a cybersecurity specialist, but I can tell you the demand for an expert cybersecurity person will literally never, ever go away. There is no such thing as a perfectly safe, secure digital computer system. There just isn't. It's virtually impossible at this point. And because we come to rely on them so much in personal lives and in business, keeping them secure is a very, very, very valuable skill to have. So you're to be commended for your interest. That's really, really cool. Okay. All right. So let's go and move on. A little bit of a word about the Tech Academy. We deliver a lot of technology training, but our primary offerings are what are called boot camps. Give me a yes or no in chat. Do you know what boot camps are? Yes or no? Or not sure, whatever you want to put. A bunch of yeses. Excellent. All right. So I'll be really brief. I mean, they're intense certification programs designed to help people break into tech really fast, right? They focus on entry-level positions. We know a lot about these. This industry of boot camps has only been around for about 11 years, and we've been offering really thorough, budget-friendly, flexible, trusted coding boot camps for over a decade. We were around at the very beginning of this when people were laughing at us and saying no one would ever hire someone from a boot camp. Well, those days are long gone. Our certifications are really cost-effective and beginner friendly, which is really cool. They're also self-paced, which is kind of unique. We'll talk about that more later on, but just think about that. Technical training that's self-paced, so you don't have to try to move at the same pace as every other person, which is really, really cool, okay? We cover really in-demand skills. We have phenomenal online reviews and really flexible scheduling. We're well below the national average in terms of price. The average price in America of a boot camp is $13,500. We have boot camps that start as low as $59.80, which is pretty cool. And I always like to read our mission statement because we put a lot of thought into this back in 2014, like what really motivates us. So the mission statement of the Tech Academy is to graduate entry-level technology professionals that excel in the basics of their field and thereafter have successful careers in the tech industry and whose actions raise industry standards and surpass client expectations. Our product is you working in tech. A little bit about class expectations. We'll cover a lot of simple definitions for technical terms. We don't like to talk over people's heads at all. You ever meet that person who really likes to drop big words into a conversation? Yeah, I don't like that person, and probably you don't either. There's no need for it at all. And particularly when you're trying to learn a technical subject, I kind of see it as like, whether they mean it or not, it's almost a barrier. Like it makes the whole subject seem really complex and hard to understand. Now, I'm telling you this as someone who's like worked in computers and gotten thousands of people into technology, even though it looks at first glance like a pretty complex area, the fundamental concepts in computers are actually really simple. And if you can learn those fundamentals, you can build a lot of complexity on top of it. But if your foundation is solid, you'll do great. All right, so another thing, we don't have any coding in this class. Now, we do offer free coding classes. They happen about once every week or other week. If you go to our pages on Meetup, you can sign up for one of our free coding classes. They're a lot of fun. Cheska, can you find a link to the next class and drop it into Slack when you Slack? I'm in work mode. Can you drop it into chat when you get a minute? And I'm gonna take a sip of water real quick. Slack. I need help. All right. So we're going to have Q&A later. Let's start to have fun. All right. So I'm going to un-F11 this. Come on. And let's talk about a day in the life of a cybersecurity expert. Yay. This is great stuff. So I mentioned that the need for cybersecurity specialists is really high, but I kind of want to, just as context before we dive into the meat of this, just talk a little bit about why. A lot of the times when you think about cybersecurity, you're thinking about what we see in TV shows and movies and stuff, and what we see in the news about bad actors, people that are malicious and are deliberately trying to break into electronic systems to cause havoc or make money or whatever, right? The fact is that while that absolutely does happen, sometimes, actually fairly often, the things that go wrong with your systems are not intentional in nature. It's the regular users of the software that do something that you didn't anticipate. And suddenly data that shouldn't be displayed is displayed, or an operation that they should not be allowed to do, they do, even if they're not being malicious about it. So I'm just kind of setting the tone that when we talk about cybersecurity, while a lot of it does in fact involve protecting your systems against malicious or bad actors, and if an incident does occur, thoroughly figuring out exactly what went wrong and doing everything you can to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? It isn't always that. But at the end of the day, if cybersecurity specialists are doing their job well, then these electronic systems that we all pretty much have to rely on in modern society are made safer. Again, there's no such thing as a perfectly secure or safe system when it comes to computers, but we can do a lot to really mitigate that risk. So let's get into it. What I want to cover here with my really poor animation that I absolutely need to fix, and I apologize. There we go. Is what are the principal kinds of activities that would keep a cybersecurity specialist busy? So we're going to cover each of these in detail, so I'm not going to elaborate on any of them, but they are, as you can see on the screen, building the tools that are used for security, having meetings. Now, in technology in general, we don't have a lot of stupid, foolish meetings. Meetings that happen between technology professionals usually have a pretty important purpose, and they don't go on very long. Not always true, but mostly true. This next one of domain study is important for anybody in technology, but it's of even heightened importance, as we're going to discuss, for people in the security area, which is this domain, studying your domain, studying your area of expertise, right? And then this cross collaboration. Security, what we call like attack vectors, that means All the places in an electronic system where someone could intentionally or unintentionally get access to things they shouldn't and cause problems. Those attack vectors, they can be almost anywhere in your software. And so often, cybersecurity specialists have to collaborate with people from all over the organization, which is actually kind of cool. You end up learning a lot of things. There is, of course, helping your team, which is common in any job. But we'll talk about like what does that mean for a cybersecurity specialist. And then because this is very, security is very often tied to rules, like hard and fast rules. They might be internal rules for your company. They might even be legal rules that your state or federal government or whatever enforce by law. And so you'll very often work with areas of the company that are called compliance. They make sure you comply with the rules, right? It's important for a cybersecurity specialist. And then the business of making software, the software development lifecycle, you want to make sure that that's secure too. We'll talk about that in some detail. And finally, if something really does go bad, if you have an incident, you have to respond to it and then do forensics. It's not like CSI Miami or anything, although it can be pretty wild what you find out and how you do your detective work. So let's dig into these in a little bit of detail. First of all, there is coding. I mean, you're a software engineer. If you go into cybersecurity, in my opinion, my experience, you're really limited in what you can do if you can't actually write code. Now, to be sure, a lot of the time as a cybersecurity specialist, you are a specialist, right? You aren't really the person that's going to be building the computer program from scratch, from the ground up, or be part of a team that is building the computer program from scratch. But you still do a lot of coding, right? For example, there might be specific parts of an application where security is paramount, and you might do coding on those. You might do coding to develop tools apart from the computer program that can help you with your security functions. You might spend time fixing really critical bugs inside the software. You didn't build the whole software, but a really dangerous part of it has been identified, and they need someone with a real good head on their shoulders for security to come in and fix a bug that maybe it led to a problem, maybe it didn't, but it could, right? And finally, especially in today's software engineering practices, we try to automate a lot of things about the software development process, and that applies to testing as well. Automated testing, in fact, plays a really, really, really important role in modern software development because it's what creates trust in all of our internal systems and processes with engineering teams. More importantly, it can serve to create trust with people who aren't technical, and that's really, really important. If you break into technology, as I hope all of you do, some of you maybe are, in fact, give me in chat, just answer me in chat, are you already working in tech, yes or no? And yes, Jeff, coding is similar to scripting. Give me yes or no, are you already working in tech? I've got one yes, two, about 4 yeses, some no's, some yeses. Okay, good, excellent. So, when you work in technology and you're right in the heart of it, either building the software or helping to maintain the tools that make the software development process easier and faster and more efficient, or you're in cybersecurity and you're working to make the program more secure. In other words, when you're in that tech space, in my experience, it doesn't take very long before you can, unless you're not careful, start to lose sight of what it's like not knowing all that you know. And why is that important? Well, if you don't know technology, if you don't know programming, if you don't know how computers work on the inside, then if, say, you're an executive, you're a middle manager, you're an end user, to a certain extent, you are at the mercy of a body of knowledge that you don't understand. You're at the mercy of technology. Now, I don't mean to be too dramatic about it, but it kind of is that way, and it can be really difficult for people to experience. One of the things that we can do, whether you're directly in cybersecurity or you're in some other area of the technology industry, one of the things we can do is adopt practices that demonstrate trustability. I don't know if that's a word. That demonstrate trustworthiness in both our applications, our programs, and in the way we develop and deploy and maintain those programs. I'll answer that question in a second, Jeff. It's a good question. So this trust factor is pretty important. And I'm spending a little bit of time on this final bullet point of automated security testing, because if you're going to go into this cybersecurity area, it is a pretty central sort of attitude or point of view to have, which is that the more automated tests you can set up, both to test the software that you're building and to test the tools that are used in the software development process, the more you can do that, the greater benefit, not just to the software itself, but to all the people in your organization who depend on the engineering personnel. It's a really important skill to build up. So this is some of the coding that you'll be doing. Now, Jeff had a great question. He said, what coding or programming languages do cybersecurity specialists use? And while there isn't any one answer, like they all use blank, I can give you some guidelines. And by the way, there are a few areas in technology where there really is only one language to use. They're very rare, but they happen. If you're doing web development, you're building web pages, and you're actually doing programming, you're not just designing a web page that's static. If you're designing programs that will make that web page dynamic, you're using JavaScript. That's pretty much it. But in cybersecurity, in general, most tools you're going to use a programming language called Python. You're absolutely right, Rod. There are other languages, but Python is the most popular one. We have a phenomenal Python section in our cybersecurity bootcamp for that reason. Not only do you need to program to be a really good cybersecurity specialist, but you better learn the language of choice in the cybersecurity world. So it's Python. That was a good question. All right, so let's move on and talk about meetings. And again, I don't know anybody who absolutely loves meetings. Maybe they're out there, right? But I want to reinforce what I said before. Usually meetings that happen in the engineering world, they're usually pretty fruitful, okay? One of the biggest ones is daily stand-ups. I'm not going to go to a big old spiel about how daily stand-ups work, but the basic principle is the team gets together at the beginning of the day, and each person goes over what they got done yesterday, what they're going to do today, and whether they have any roadblocks to getting their work done. That's a stand-up, right? It's actually a really, really valuable meeting. It usually lasts 5 or 10 minutes tops, which is really cool. But there are also some times where you need to spend a little more time to sync up different teams, right, and get everybody on the same page. But they're usually technical in nature, these meetings, and they don't just go on and on. But those are some of the kinds of things you're going to need to do as a cybersecurity specialist. Really, worker, but it is part of what you do. There are other meetings where you're going to do two very specialized activities that are primarily just cybersecurity activities. So let's talk about that first one, threat modeling. It's basically a creative exercise when you think about all the ways that your software and your other tools and systems are at risk. And you'll model, actually like come up with, how could we be attacked? What are the inroads? What's the method of attack? What does this look like? Whether it's an accidental or an intentional, what does that threat look like, right? And then tied hand in hand with that, you'll have, technical discussions about, all right, with the way our systems are currently set up, what areas are most at risk? What does that risk look like? What's the effect of a successful security incident in that area? And so these risk assessments are pretty valuable, right? Jeffrey asks, are there different tiers of cybersecurity specialists? There's no one standard for that. What I've seen in practice is that you may very well, in one individual company, want to have a little bit of a hierarchy, but in general, most companies adopt at least a cybersecurity specialist and a senior cybersecurity specialist. There's some sort of acknowledgement of the fact that there's a greater maturity, depth of experience and knowledge, but there's no exact like naming convention or role progression defined. And that's actually true in most of technology. There's a few sort of standards when you're, in and around the real big tech centers like Silicon Valley and up near Seattle. There's, in some of those large tech companies, some generally accepted sort of like leveling guides to different roles, but even those differ from company to company. So the answer to that is yes, there are different tiers of cybersecurity specialists, but it's totally up to the company to define what those mean. It's a good question. All right, so let's move on to another type of activity that will keep a cybersecurity specialist busy. This one's actually really, really, really important for people in the cybersecurity space, and that is domain study. Now, if you've done any work in technology or even are considering working in technology, you're probably very aware that technology changes fairly often, like now. And oh, now it changed again. Being a little sarcastic, but technology changes quickly. Well, there are certain areas of technology that are relatively stable. Working with what are called relational databases, where you store your data in tables that have some relationship to each other. Like you might have a customer table that's related to an address table. So you can have multiple customers at a single address and so on and so forth, right? That technology was pretty well laid down in the early 70s and with a few exceptions, hasn't changed significantly in almost 50 years, which is kind of cool. Now, web development, on the other hand, is a pretty constantly shifting area. Security is always shifting. It's like trying to keep track of the puck in a hockey game. You can, like, there is no limit to the ingenuity of bad actors, of criminals out in the world. And there are so many separate individual parts to any modern software system, each of which has its own risks and ways of being attacked, that it's part of your job has to be keeping up with what the trends are. Daily, you would be reading security news. You would be reading these official reports of actual vulnerabilities that have been found out in the wild. You'd be looking to see, this particular system or language or pre-made tool, they just identified a real big risk unless you install some sort of an upgrade to it. Are we using that? Do we need to pay attention to this? So it's pretty important to, in cybersecurity, really pay attention to the news in that domain, in that area. All right, I'm going to handle a couple questions here. Diana asks, how much machine learning bridging to software engineering is needed in cyber as we grow the AI world, automation everywhere? I see AI and machine learning as room for growth. I'm not 100% that I understand the question. My initial thoughts are, there is tremendous growth in the AI area. There's a lot of efforts right now to apply some of the tools that are available in artificial intelligence to the cybersecurity area. It's early days for a lot of those things. It will help you tremendously if you're going into cybersecurity to learn about AI. That's one of the reasons that for all of our boot camps, when you're done with it, if you want to, you could add on an optional course that's just our AI developer course, because any technical discipline in the engineering space needs to be abreast of all the fundamentals of AI, the 7 or 8 different forms of AI that there are, how they work, and how they impact your discipline. So this is as much as I can think on that. If you can clarify it a little bit, that'd be great. I'll come back to another question in a moment. Let's go and move on. I love these questions. Another thing you're going to spend time doing as a cybersecurity specialist is cross collaboration. Now, let's go to a real common misconception. It's still common all these years later that when people think of programmers, all too often they think of like a single person building a program, making something. Often, if they're joking, maybe half joking, down in the basement, working 24 hours a day, drinking caffeine and eating junk food. Okay. The fact is that software development and all of the related activities are a very collaborative business. You constantly coordinate and work with other people. Okay. I will say this about cybersecurity. This is true even more in the cybersecurity area. And part of the reason is this. When you're designing a program or one feature, say, in a computer program, there's a lot involved, but the general pattern is idea to design, to build, which is where the coding happens, to test, to deployment, so the end user can use it, and then into maintenance. Idea, design, build, test, deploy, maintain. That's a general pattern in making software, right? In past years, most of the attention of security professionals and the executives in these companies was placed halfway through that process after you build something and hit the testing phase. And that's where they really started to think about security. Well, software professionals around the world started to recognize that that was a huge mistake. For one simple reason. Often, the developers would build something, but they weren't thinking about security concerns much at all. They were just trying to get the darn thing to work. And then the security professionals come in and start do testing on it, and they're like, whoa, man, you have 5 different major things that are huge risks. Developers, you've got to go back and rewrite 60% of what you just submitted. And all of a sudden, the productivity of the department falls apart, and the shipping date for when you were going to deploy the feature to the users starts to slide, and everybody has a heart attack. So the reason I bring this up, and the reason it fits here under cross collaboration, is that as a security specialist, you should be constantly striving to have security concerns be part of the earliest possible items in that process, even in the idea phase, but at least by the design phase, you want security to be in the room. They're going to spot glaring risks in simply how we're designing a feature before we've even started to build it that will save, even though it looks like it's taking extra time. Why is that idea still in design form? But if you spend that vital time in the design phase, paying attention to security concerns, now when you go to build it, it's much more secure, it gets through testing faster, and it gets through deployment faster, and there's fewer problems with it out in deployment when it hits the real world, when it hits the end user. So that's why I say cross-collaboration. And by the way, there's that word on there, DevOps. It is a philosophy or approach to building software. It stands for development and operations. And it's a set of tools and processes to get all of the parts of a company that are involved in software to integrate, to collaborate. And so you as security specialists need to have a seat at that table. Then cross-collaboration can very often involve penetration testing. This is intentionally trying to break into different systems. So you might actually meet with or work with the customer service reps who are right there inside your software all the time and sit and watch how they actually use the software to spot where there's risky things, where, oh, they're entering the right data into that form, but I can see right now that if they entered the wrong data, or if they were malicious, if they were intentionally trying to do something, we've got a problem right there. So rather than sitting in your chair and trying to just think of where are the dangerous spots in our program, you would go sit down with the people that are using it and observe their patterns of behavior. That's an example of cross collaboration and penetration testing. Okay. And then there are things called cybersecurity or security audits. And because like I said, security applies throughout this whole process, you would go meet and work with not just engineering folks to start to audit or assess what's our cybersecurity situation. Where are the risks? How well are we doing? That's all cross collaboration. All right, before we move on, let me see if I can get some questions here. What would Jeff says, what would happen if cybersecurity specialists are not up to date with the latest cybersecurity and technology landscape? And I'll answer the second part of his Jeff's question in a second. Well, I'll tell you what could happen. There is first of all, we need to explain a thing called a library. A library is a bunch of pre-made code that you can just use in your program. So let's say it involves generating random numbers. By the way, it turns out that generating random numbers in a computer is really hard. And so for each major programming language that's out there, Python or C# or Java or whatever, right? Really bright minds, typically many years ago, solved how to generate random numbers. And since no developer really wants to solve that again, if you need random numbers in your program, like say when you're building a game, you would just import that library. Good, so that's a library. There is a library called log4j, LOG for the letter J, right? And about, must be 3 years ago now, that library, which is in common use all over the world in lots of different software systems, that library had a security vulnerability. Now, the writers of that library, the people that made that code, issued a warning. Remember I said earlier about like domain knowledge studying, right? They issued it in all the places that security specialists should be reading about it and told you exactly what to do to update this log4j library so it wasn't at risk. But a huge number of companies around the world didn't do it. And about 3 years ago, there were major incidents at lots of large tech companies and businesses where that vulnerability was actually used by bad actors to hack into systems and cause a lot of problems. So when Jeff asks what would happen if cybersecurity specialists are not up to date with the latest cybersecurity and technology landscape, that's an example. They are putting their entire businesses at risk. He also asked, how could one make it a norm to stay up to date? Well, part of that's personal discipline. Part of it's passion for the industry. Typically, when you go into cybersecurity, if you find you're enjoying it, you've done it for 2 or 3 years, you're probably going to stay in that area because you really love it. Part of it could be in a well-functioning cybersecurity organization that they actually schedule time for it, or they bring in, trainers, or they do what we call brown bag lunches, where when you're having lunch, everybody just gathers together or gathers in the same Zoom call, and one member of the team volunteers to teach about something they've been studying. So there's a lot of different approaches, but at the end of the day, it's got to be your personal passion and interest that really just keeps you wanting to stay up to date, and a sense of responsibility about the fact that your work done well is often the thing that secures your company, literally keeps it in existence. There are many instances, even over the last 5 or 10 years, of companies that have gone bankrupt or come close to it because of the damage of security incidents. That's a good question. So one more here. I like this one a lot. This is really good. I think this is Navaid. If I mispronounced your name, I apologize. Says, I'm reading that we might be in the AI hype bubble. There's been some reports from various media outlets. Now, one, if the media says it, don't trust it. Sorry, I sound like an old curmudgeon. I got 54 years of watching the media lie and create controversy where there isn't. That's just me being snarky. Two, when it comes to technology, there's this pattern that happens over and over and over again, about every 3 to 5 years. Some new technology comes out that people in the media go, oh my God, programmers are going to be obsolete. Don't study coding, boys and girls. Programmers are going to be obsolete. I saw this my very first time when I was a teenager in 1984. I've seen it about 7 times since. Huge stories all over the news. Programmers are going to be obsolete. Hi, we're not obsolete. It's not true. Now, talking about AI in particular, it is very, very early days in AI. And while the current landscape of companies in AI and the kinds of services they offer, while that landscape is absolutely going to be different, even a year from now, but especially 2, 3, 4, 5, the use of AI is only going to increase at an absolutely astronomical rate. Period. End of story. If you learn the fundamentals of AI, and again, there's 7 or 8 different branches of AI, okay? But if you learn the principles behind them, whether it's machine learning or robotics or generative AI like ChatGPT or computer vision, all these areas of AI, if you learn how those things work, you will never want for a job. Yes, the exact product you might be creating may shift a lot as AI changes and matures. But there's no bubble here at all in terms of AI. All right. One more question, then we'll move on. Jeff, I love that. Definitely true. Never trust the media. Always verify. What would the security specialist group be called when they work with DevOps teams? Now, this again changes from organization to organization, but there is a term that is becoming relatively popular in the industry where DevOps means marrying up development and operations. Like development makes the software, operations deploys it and maintains it. Make it and then service it when it's in the hands of users, right? In the past, those two organizations were very siloed and they would fight a lot. So DevOps tries to bring them together. So this term, kind of what you're looking for there, Jeff, is DevSecOps. Let's have that same sort of collaborative information sharing approach with development, security, and operations. So lots of big companies now have a DevSecOps organization or department inside their company. That was a good question. All right, let's move on. Another area that cybersecurity specialists and anyone in life will spend their time on is helping your team, right? But what does that look like if you're in cybersecurity? Well, obviously debugging, like the code is going wrong. There's some bug. Maybe somebody exploited the bug. Maybe they didn't, but we found a bug and it's a security bug. You might spend time debugging, going through there like 2 people looking at the same code going, what's going on here, right? So that's helping your team. You might want to train. Like we said, the brown bag lunch kind of thing. You might be super excited about a particular aspect of cybersecurity, and you're like, man, I'd love to tell the rest of the team about that, right? Very often, helping your team really just means talking through a problem. You know what happens about 75% of the time in engineering? It's not just in engineering, but that's the area I live and work in. You're just banging your head against the wall, trying to solve something. Everything you're doing seems like it should work, but it isn't. And you just walk out the door, right? And you go to your friend, a teammate, and you go, okay, let me tell you about what I'm bumping into. I got this and this, and oh, I figured out how to fix it. And then you go back to your desk. That happens a lot. So sometimes you might just be lending an ear, but often you'll have them describe the whole situation to you and you'll just talk back and forth, and suddenly that aha moment happens. So that is a totally valid thing to be doing as a cybersecurity engineer, and frankly, it's just a member of a high-performing team. Then there's this specialized activity of code review. Someone else wrote code. They wrote some little bit of computer program code, and they want someone else to look at it. Now, this actually happens fairly often with the cybersecurity specialists because a lot of programmers don't have that security point of view. It's not that they don't care in general, but they're not an expert like you. Remember, this is about a day in the life of a cybersecurity specialist. So often, and even an experienced software developer who's like, I wrote pretty good code, if they're being really responsible to say, hey, Diana, you're the cybersecurity expert. Can you just put a set of eyes on this from a security point of view before we actually make that code that I wrote permanent? That happens fairly often, okay? And that's helping your team. And another phenomenal way you can help your team, and this is true in every technical organization, and it's almost always neglected to the detriment of the organization, is good documentation. Pardon me, good documentation. When you take it upon yourself to document a process or a technology or a problem or an issue really, really, really well, you are helping your company more than you will ever know. Well, be in technology a few years and you'll recognize the unbelievable value of that. In a lot of organizations, some of the most valuable pieces of information are stuck inside senior engineers' head. They call it tribal knowledge. It's not written down anywhere. And so there's always the, what if so-and-so gets hit by a bus? But, well, that's kind of morbid. Listen, people switch jobs all the time. People retire. People take vacation. The more you can extract that vital information from your head or other senior engineer's head and get it written down, it's an unbelievable benefit to the whole team and, in fact, the whole company. All right. And some people have a gift or a passion for that kind of thing, and they write really good documentation. Some people should not write documentation at all. Don't be one of those people. All right. Now, here's another, there's only a couple of bullet points here, but these are really, really important. I kind of mentioned this compliance thing. Listen, there's not a business in the world that isn't subject to some laws. Every business in the modern world, in every first world country, there's privacy laws, as an example, that every business has to obey, right? You got to obey the law, right? But also some industries have additional, sometimes very tight regulations around them legally. Healthcare, of course, has thousands of laws it has to abide by. If you're in the legal field, if you're in the mining field, anything in manufacturing, right? Almost every industry has its own set of laws around it, right? So in most larger companies, there is an area called compliance. And even in smaller companies, if it isn't in its own area, I guarantee you some of the executives are thinking with this stuff. They have to, because going out of compliance threatens the existence of their whole company, their whole organization. So those people will want to interact with cybersecurity specialists like you. They want to make sure that even if you aren't writing the code, that you're making sure the people that do write code that meets regulations and standards. If you are a cybersecurity specialist that also ends up doing a lot of code, you want to make sure that yours meets those regulations and standards. It's very important. And to that end, you'll very often, as a cybersecurity specialist, have to collaborate with those legal and compliance teams. You can sometimes be the bridge between the engineer who's going to write the code and the legal staff who are saying, listen, we cannot ever have X, Y, and Z happen, or we're in major trouble. But they're just saying this can't happen. They don't know how to write code. They don't know how to set up the electronic systems. You do, so you're the advice, the conduit to the development, the engineering teams. All right, this is the fun one. Well, just depends. How many of you like a good detective story? Drop in chat if you really like a good whodunit and trying to track down what happened. Woo! Yeah. Incident response is fun. Forensics is even more fun. Incredibly challenging, okay? If something goes sideways and you actually have a security incident, of course, your first priority needs to be immediately handle the danger. If you have ransomware and everybody's literally locked out of their systems, you've got to handle that as fast as possible, or the company will just shut down. It'll stop, okay? If a bunch of passwords got released, username and all those details got released, you have to immediately get a hold of all the people that were compromised and strongly encourage them to change all their passwords. Sometimes, if you can, you would force a password reset on every user. And the next time they log in, they're required to reset their password. These kinds of things. But once the danger's out of the way, the really, really valuable work can happen. You've got to figure out how exactly that occurred. Now, there's a couple different things here. This is a fun area to start digging into, right? There's discussions about working on an actual like running system and trying to track down what happened. Or let's say it's a specific computer that got hacked into. Do you take that computer out of its normal operation, isolate it, unplug it from everything, and start digging in to see exactly what happened? If you do that, can you make a copy of what's in that computer and do your research on the copy so that you leave that actual computer safe from a legal standpoint, so that no fancy-dancy lawyer can accuse you of having changed what's in there because it's evidence, if you will? There's all these considerations, and you really do have to think like a detective. No, it's not like Hollywood and the hacker and the satellite and all that, right? But it's unbelievably valuable work. And if you're the person that likes, just wants to find out what exactly occurred, and you're connecting this piece to that piece, and oh, this action happened here, and nothing happened over here where it was connected to, but oh, look, we take logs of everything. Let me pour through those logs. Everything's working fine. Everything's working fine. That's unexpected. What happened at that exact point in time? Like, it's fun work. Okay. It is some of the most like, everybody here familiar with this concept of context shifting, where you're working on some sort of problem, you're doing some sort of work, and a lot of it's thought work, and you're working it all out in your head, and then someone comes up and says, hey, what do you want for lunch? You're like, I don't know, a turkey sandwich. And then you got to go back and you got to try to reconstruct, where was I at? What's going on? Okay. This forensic work is distraction-free work. You want no one to bother you while you do it. But the rewards are phenomenal. When you finally spot the exact thing, now everybody's got to, oh, and then you go into this creative mode of, how do we stop that from ever happening again? And then the legal team can go, who's responsible for? But that's a whole different story. So that's a sort of a layout of like what a cybersecurity specialist would be doing in any sort of given day in the life. Let me see if I've missed any questions before we move on. Absolutely. Be a red hat someday in pen test. Penetration test is so much fun. Oh man. There's a service we have at the Tech Academy that I'll tell you more about in a moment. It's called the Tech Academy Accelerator. And in those workshops, I get to do a deep dive into things. And we're going to do one, I think, upcoming in the next few weeks or so, where we're actually going to attempt to break into systems and show you how that's done. It's a lot of fun. All right. One other question. I think I've kind of answered this. How essential is it for cybersecurity specialists to study on cyber laws and regulations if no compliance person is available? It's even more important. It's even more important that you study up on what those laws are. Because at the end of the day, if the company goes down, you're out of a job. So that's my point of view about it. Okay. All right. I think I answered those. Let's move on. Go back here. Okay, so let's look at some Q&A action. I think I've asked everything or answered everything that was asked. I want to give everybody an opportunity here. Okay. Any questions before we move on that you want to throw into the chat? I'll take a sip of water while y'all think. Oh, I missed this one from Jeff. How do cybersecurity professionals prepare for incident response and forensics cases? Well, you want to do a really good training in it. You can learn the basics of cybersecurity and just do a little bit of penetration testing and learn a little bit about threat modeling and that kind of stuff, in a month or something. But it's not going to prepare you for the really lucrative roles, the roles that provide tremendous value. That's why we put so much into our cybersecurity boot camp. That boot camp is beefy. Okay. But in terms of preparing for it, there is training you can do in like the correct methodology to do forensics, but some of it really is just be on the job for 6 months, a year, be there watching when an incident happens to see what the senior cybersecurity personnel do. And once they're done and all the dust is settled, pull them aside and say, okay, can you give me a debrief on what went down there? And part of the reason there is no perfect answer to this, Jeff, is because of what I mentioned earlier about the fact that it's an ever-shifting landscape. And the kinds of attacks that happen shift and change all the time. So there's no one exact methodology. That said, yes, especially for forensics, there are certain accepted principles, and quite often they usually revolve around, if this were going to be a legal matter, how do we do our forensics in such a way that we do not put any legal case at risk? And again, this is stuff you learn about when you do a good cybersecurity training, like we do. That's a good question. See, this market is crazy competitive. Any advice for juniors entering cyber, entry-level roles to start at? I'm working on my CompTIA Security Plus certification. So CompTIA, for those who don't know, is a training organization. They publish training specifications and exams for those training specifications. And Security Plus is one of their trainings. Okay. My advice for people that are looking to those certifications is absolutely do them, but you still got to learn to be a programmer. You have to learn web technologies because the web is the most common attack vector for most online systems. You have to use how databases, learn everything about databases and database programming, because that is where the gold is. That's where that's the pirate's treasure in there. That's what everybody's trying to get to, is the business's data that's stored in a secure database. And if it's not actually secure, that's your job, is to secure it, right? And a lot of other things I can go into. But a truly competent cybersecurity professional who wants to set themselves apart in the job market is trained as a programmer as well as the principles of cybersecurity. That's been true for 30 years, and that's how we train people. Okay. Oh, really great point. And again, Diana says after she's done with CompTIA, she's doing Amazon Web Services and CISA. I forgot what CISA is. CISA. Can you type what that acronym stands for, so I don't have to see? Yeah. Okay, that'll pop in a second, right? CY. Okay. Yes, you can do a lot of training that's purely cybersecurity, but if it doesn't include computer programming and all the disciplines related to web and database and version control, and frankly, the software development process, you're gonna have a very limited pool of jobs. On the other hand, if you know all of those things, every single one of those, so CYSA is cybersecurity analyst, good. Every single one of those areas, they all have security concerns. And so you've opened up a much wider range of jobs to go for. Does that answer that question, Diana? Yeah, absolutely. That was a great question. All right. So speaking of this cybersecurity thing, what you're looking at on the screen is all 12 of our boot camps. And we have a specialized cybersecurity boot camp. We have 11 others, right? Because we cover a wide range. You can see them, like UI, UX, that's user interface design, right? C#, Java, mobile app, AI, developer bootcamp, front end, like data science, game developer. We actually have more certification programs than any other coding bootcamp on earth. And these bootcamps are, as I said, self-paced, but they're also instructor supported. Yes, you can move at the pace that works for you, but you've always got access to knowledgeable, helpful instructors. They're also really flexible. Our boot camps let you set your own schedule. Yeah, you've got to put in a minimum. If you're not doing 20 hours a week, like, you're just gonna have a hard time getting through it. But you figure out when those hours are. You can control that, so they can fit around your schedule, right? And you can enroll 365 days a year. We have great content, really well-rounded and in-depth, and they're affordable, right? Also, this is huge. All of these programs you see on the screen, they include both job placement training. We teach you all about getting a job in tech, and job placement assistance. We have people on staff whose only job is to help you get hired. That's all they do, and they're very, very, very good at it. And most importantly, these programs are designed for absolute beginners. No technology knowledge or experience is required. You don't have to be a nerd to get through these things. You might have to be a nerd to get some of the stupid jokes that I drop in the videos, but you don't have to be a nerd to get through the programs. So we consistently land on every major best coding bootcamp list there is out there. We're really proud of that because they're picky about who they put on those lists. Our average review rating across all of the different bootcamp review sites is 4.8 out of 5 stars. That's based on feedback from our students and our graduates, like the people that have been there. So with that said, why would you want to work in tech? I've just sort of laid out one role in tech, cybersecurity. As you saw a minute ago, there's a lot of different roles, okay? Well, here's some things to consider. Technology in general, jobs in this industry have really good work-life balance. And especially post-COVID, many of them allow for remote work, which some people love, some people don't. But if that's important to you, it's quite possible in tech. It's also a really creative industry. You can take a lot of personal pride in your work. That's true in all of those different disciplines, all those boot camps. Cybersecurity, absolutely. When you're the one that shut off a risk factor, when you eliminated a bug that could have put your entire company at risk, it feels really good, right? Tech is also a very stable industry. Yes, there's shifts in which jobs are like more popular here, now, then, or whatever, right? One, cybersecurity ain't going anywhere. It's just getting more and more needed and more popular. But two, as long as you have the foundations of software development, you understand the basics and fundamentals of how computers work and how databases work and how web technologies work and how version control works and, like a core language like Java or Python or C#. If you've got that, you're never going to be without a job. It may shift in what your focus is, but you're never going to be without a job. And they pay well, these jobs. And as long as you continue to learn, apply yourself, you get regular increases in pay. The average salary for a software developer in America is $120,000 a year. Meanwhile, the average salary period is about $62,000 a year. That's huge. Like, technologists get paid well. We solve difficult problems. We deserve to get paid well, but we do get paid well. Now, with all that said, there are some barriers to doing a boot camp. And by the way, a boot camp isn't the only way to get into tech. Yes, I co-founded a software developer boot camp. You might think I'm going to say, well, that's the only way in. Absolutely not. There's 3 ways into tech: college, university, boot camps, and self-study. Any one of them is valid. They each have their pros and cons. If you're considering a boot camp, though, let's just face it, there are a few barriers. First of all, the tuition. It does cost thousands of dollars to go to any decent boot camp. And yes, while we are priced below the national average, and we're very proud of the way we price things, it can cost thousands of dollars. What we've done to handle that is provide multiple financing options. We have really good financing. First of all, there's a huge upfront discount. You can just pay for the boot camp up front. And there's monthly payment options for people with all kinds of credit. The thing I want to stress here is this. While a boot camp isn't right for everyone, fully acknowledge that. If it is the right fit for you, getting through a Tech Academy bootcamp is genuinely an investment in yourself. You are giving yourself a set of skills that, 1, lots of people don't want to do or are afraid of, and 2, lots of people need. That's a pretty smart equation. And you're doing it in an industry that happens to pay a lot. So, another barrier to getting through boot camp is time. There's a lot to learn in a short period of time. There's definitely required time investment. Now, some boot camp providers, the way they approach this is they either train people in cohorts, like everybody studies as a group. They all start on the same day, they end on the same day, and you all study the same material each day. I don't even want to talk about how like that fails the student, okay? Or sometimes make you come into an actual like building. You got to be in person, right? Our programs are all 100% online. If you live in Portland, Oregon, you can come into our headquarters if you want to, okay? But our programs are fully online, and you choose your study schedule. It is a self-paced study schedule. So yes, there is a lot to get through, but you're going to set what that schedule is. which means you can study concurrent to holding down a job or even going to school for something else. Okay. Finally, and I really want to just stress this one. It is a barrier that you're going to need to have some technical interest or ability. Now, judging by the questions I've seen in the chat and people that answer whether they're already kind of, working in tech, I know that most of you have some technical interest or ability. If there are any of you who have ever, even for a moment, felt like when you look at technology or a specific area of technology, you felt like, man, am I dumb? I just don't get that. This doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it's just not for me. I want to clarify something. In virtually every case, it isn't you, it's the materials. Many technology education materials are actually too hard, and they're too hard for a specific reason. It's the curse of the expert. If you are making education materials for technology, hopefully you're a technology expert, right? For many tech professionals, it's really hard to remember what it was like when they didn't know anything. I've done this before. You sit down and write a technical curriculum for a specific piece of technology or language or something, and you assume they're already going to know about lots of other things. No, they're not. We cracked that in the first year when I truly embarrassed myself by writing a course that my co-founder looked and said, Erik, I'll never forget. He says, Erik, are you under the impression that like people learn to create a basic web page at some point, like when they're in school or something? I went, yeah. And he went, no, Erik, that doesn't happen in school. It might at some weird school. It didn't happen to my school or my sister's school, anybody I know. We don't know what this stuff is. And I'm like, oh. So I've done it, so I know how it can happen. I'm going on about this one because I don't want anybody to ever feel like when they try to study some technical area and they're like, man, it isn't you, it's the material. I'm not saying our material is perfect, but we work tirelessly to teach the fundamentals so well that when you start to add on complexity on top of it, you can understand it. And more importantly, you can actually apply it. When you sit down to write code, you're like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this. I'm writing code, okay? So the whole point is you don't have to be a nerd to get through this stuff. And you don't have to have any background in tech to enroll. So I have a question for you, a couple questions. Are you working a dead-end job, like a job, and I don't mean to be like derogatory about it, but like a job where when you have your personal goals, your family's goals, and you look forward 5 or 10 years, is that job really going to accomplish those goals? Like you look around at the people who are really pillars of your profession and you look at what they make and you're like, that's not going to cut it. They're only making $85,000 a year and they've been doing this for 10 years. Do I want to do that? If you're in that kind of a situation, which is pretty common, you might want to think. Maybe you're even unemployed. Maybe you want to work from home or have some balance there. Maybe you want to spend more time with your loved ones, but still do your job because you want to be productive. In other words, it's a personal question. Is it time for a career change for you? If it is, then the Tech Academy is the solution. We are career change experts. It's what we do. And we did it on purpose. That bridge, the orange bridge you see in our logo, it's there because we represent a route into technology for everyone. We want to make it as easy as possible for anyone interested in joining this really, really cool industry to actually succeed, to actually make it. And at this point, we've got over a decade of experience helping people break into tech, thousands of people. And they do well. Most Tech Academy grads, we keep track of all the statistics because we're nerds, right? On average, our graduates make $30 an hour in their first job. That's $60,000 a year. And that's in their first job. Flash forward a year or two or three, and many of them are breaking 100,000 or up. And it's everywhere, from small businesses, medium-sized businesses, all the way to the big guys like Epic Games, Uber, Disney. I'll never forget the first time one of our people got hired at Disney. That was a happy day. That was really, really cool. Nike, Facebook, all the big guys, right? So as a reminder, we have open enrollment. You can start anytime, and I encourage you to start now. Now, If you are interested and you want to start in August, it's your lucky month. Well, it's 1 week left of your lucky month. And here's why. For people who enroll this month, that upfront tuition discount jumps to 50%. So if a boot camp happened to be $12,000, it's only going to cost you $6,000, as an example. Also, if you pay up front like that and you happen to need a laptop to do your studies, we'll ship you a refurbished laptop. It's yours. You can keep it just so you can get through your studies well, right? Also, for people enrolled this month, there's no sales tax, no matter where you live. Yes, the taxes get paid. We obey the law. We pay the tax for you, so you don't have to, okay? We'll also ship you a very specific selection of our books, physical books that you can have to hand to study. Our Intro to Coding books, our Computers and Technology Simplified book, which is one of the coolest things we've ever produced, and the Technology Basics Dictionary with thousands of simple, clear, easy to understand definitions for a lot of complex technology terms. That alone will help your family too. You can easily explain a technology term to them. Often I've seen people grab that dictionary out of someone's hands and just start looking through it. It's a dictionary because they can finally understand some of this technology stuff that just goes over their head. So you get those for free. We send them to your house. We'll also send you a copy of our career planning guide. Now, this is a very special thing. There was a missing piece of knowledge for people that broke into technology. And that really was, how do I navigate the first, say, 3 years of my career? What do I need to be paying attention to in the first 6 months, in the first year and a half, in the first 3 years to really set myself up well? Yay, I broke into tech. That's fantastic. I feel wonderful. I've got the job. All right. What do I pay attention to? I want to learn everything. Well, you can't learn everything. What are the priorities? We answered all of that in this phenomenal career planning guide. I've seen the guidance in there help people add $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year onto their salaries in a 2 or 3 year period. It's a super valuable guide. We put a lot into that. You get a copy of that for free, okay? And you get 3 months of free access to something I referred to earlier, which is the Tech Academy Accelerator. This is a subscription service which gives you access to over 100 free educational videos, over 100 free mini courses, and access to our weekly workshops, which are nothing like this. These are introductory workshops. I love doing them. But in the accelerated workshops, the gloves are off. We do really deep dives with back and forth chat and video, answer questions. We build things, we break things. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. And you get 3 months of that for free. And finally, this is huge, you get unlimited job placement assistance. Now, what do we mean by that specifically? We mean this. When you finish your boot camp and you've gone through the job placement course and you're in that final stage where you're like, all right, I just filled my head full of all this stuff. I learned all this stuff. I did a live project, so I feel like I can actually be part of a team. I can be a developer. I can be a technology worker. Now I got to get hired. Like I said earlier, we have phenomenal professionals that all they do is help people. Now, the time is really valuable, but for people that sign up this month, you will have access to work hand in hand with those professionals for as long as it takes you to get hired. And that's it's just invaluable. So if you are interested, go to this link. I believe my assistant is going to drop it into chat. Unless I get there first. Ah, she got it. So I'm going to pause a moment to take a sip of water. I've been talking a lot. I get excited. And for anybody who's interested, just click on that link and fill out the simple form. After the form is a series of really cool steps. They tell you all about the Tech Academy. I've only communicated a little bit. I'm sure you can imagine, like, to get someone through a boot camp involves a lot of people, a lot of curriculum, a lot of process. It's phenomenal what we do, and you learn all about it in that series of steps. There's like videos, articles. There's even an optional step to book a call with our admissions personnel. They know everything about all the boot camps. Okay, so here's the question that I missed. Jeffrey says, how could one who seeks cybersecurity entry-level positions stand out from the crowd? I like that question. I'm going to answer that. So, one, be an actual programmer as well. I've kind of stressed that. We do cover that on our cybersecurity boot camp. You become an actual full stack computer programmer. Okay. But apart from that, there's 2 or 3 things I'd recommend. And by the way, I want everybody to listen to this because it's not just entry-level cybersecurity person who wants to stand out from the crowd. If you are trying to break into any aspect of technology, there's 2 or 3 things you can really concentrate on, and they're not really that hard. One is to start publishing something online that's in your voice. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be a blog. It could be steadily posting on LinkedIn or your Facebook. It could be steadily posting on X. Whatever your platform of choice is, whatever you enjoy communicating on, communicate regularly. Do not be embarrassed or hold yourself back because you are at the beginning of your journey. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people are also at the beginning of their journey. And very often, they don't want to hear from the 55-year-old nerd who's been programming for 44 years. They want to hear from you. They want to hear what you're bumping up against. They want to hear some really cool thing that you learned the other day. They want to hear about an interview that went well. They want to hear about your journey. You can inspire people. Publish something online regularly on your platform of choice. You will get noticed, guaranteed. And it doesn't take very long to have at least some engagement, and put that on your applications. If you've been being active on LinkedIn, put that LinkedIn profile on there. I can't tell you how many times recruiters actually go to your LinkedIn profile, and if they see lots of posts and lots of engagement with it, that stands out. Here's the second thing you can do. Find and contribute to an open source development project. There's a lot to that. I don't have time to go into the details on it. That's something I could, that'd be a good subject for a real deep dive in the accelerator workshop. But you can look up some suggestions on how to get started on open source. The fact that you're new doesn't have to stop you. Lots of open source projects need help that isn't writing that super gnarly code where you're like, I can't do that yet. That's beyond me. They need help with documentation. They need help with writing little individual tests. There's lots of things they can use help with, okay? Those are a couple ways I would stand out from the crowd. Does that help a little bit, Jeffrey? That was a great question. I like that. Excellent. I'm glad. Okay, good. Now let's move on. We're almost done. I'll get your free gift for you in a second, okay? I want to let you know about a referral program. Since our graduates love us, referrals are one of the top enrollment sources for us, and they have been for years. So because of that, years ago, we put in place a 5% commission payment for referrals. And it's simple. You refer somebody, we keep track of it. If they pay tuition, we give you 5% of what they paid. Period. No questions asked. So in a moment, I'm going to give you an email where you can send in to get your free gift. You can include in that email anybody that you want to refer. We do account for it. We keep track. We like paying those checks. It means a lot to us when you share who and what we are with your friends. Now, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but we do have 7 publications. You've heard about some of them already. We have 3 of those Learn Coding Basics in Hours books. We have a coding book for kids and young adults, which gets raves. I don't happen to like it because my business partner, Jack Stanley, was in charge of making the illustrations, and he made me look like a dork in the book. I'm joking. It's a really good book, and your kids will love it. We built, like I said, we have a dictionary, a project management handbook, You Are Not Stupid, which is a 300-some-odd page book that removes all mystery from computers and technology, and it'll stop your family from treating you like the tech support person in the family. So, speaking of the project management handbook, that is your free gift, an actual physical copy. Now, if you want to know how software is made in the modern world, this book lays it all out. The various different approaches, the kinds of people that are involved, the collaborative nature, what the sequence of actions is, it's all laid out in simple, clear terms. So we put the email, Cheska just dropped the email into chat. If you want a copy of the book, we'll send you your own physical copy in the US only. I'm sorry. It's in the US only. Although I think the Kindle version is like $2. Okay. But if you want your own physical copy, just send in an email asking for a copy of the Project Management Handbook. Please include your full mailing address, or we literally can't send it to you. And of course, this is also your opportunity to send in any further questions you have. They do get forwarded to me, or if you have anybody you want to refer. So I'm going to take a pause for a sip of water in case anybody wants to grab that email and send us in a request for the book. And we really do love giving these away. We literally keep track of it on a weekly basis. And there are people in the organization whose job is tied to how many free books did we send out in a given week. We love doing this. So get your book. All right. And let's finish up with one last thing, which is if you want to know more about like how to connect with us, go to our link tree. Cheska, if you can drop that link into the chat. This link tree is an online service. It has all of our links to our free educational YouTube video playlist, links to our books and our dictionary, links to upcoming meetups, in case you want to attend other classes, links to our social media accounts. So please follow us on social media. We'd absolutely love to see that. All right, good. That link is in there. So I want to thank you for attending. We're a little bit over. I was trying to get it done in an hour, but there's a lot. And the reason was awesome. It's because you guys had fantastic questions. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much. Super engaged. Great questions. I'd love to see you at our next event. So follow that link tree and come to our next event. And thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate it. And you had great questions. And seriously, if you have any idea that you might want to break into tech, you owe it to yourself to find out about who and what we are and whether it's a good fit for you. Awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stick around for just a second in case I see anything else come across the chat. And then I'm going to go have a little bit of dinner. You're welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks all. Appreciate it. Have a good evening, and I'll see you in the next class.